Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark. Today I am rejoined by guest Michael Zipursky. Michael, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Jonathan. Great to be with you again.
In this episode, we're going to talk about how consultants can sell into larger organizations in the current economic climate. So what's working now? But first, can you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I've been building, running, having fun with consulting businesses for over 2 decades. And the last 13 of that, we've been working with consultants all around the world, helping them to build more profitable, scalable, and strategic consulting businesses. So we've had a couple thousand consultants we've worked closely with through different training programs, coaching programs, and we built a great team that this is really what we do every single day is help consultants to grow their businesses. So it's a lot of fun.
Love it. Great. So having that broad a cross-section of the consulting market, like exposure to that larger group, what are the current challenges? What's working right now? Are budgets tightening up? Are people concerned about different things in terms of the clients? What's working for people you're working with?
Yeah, no, it's very timely because we've been seeing this across many conversations with different clients, also through the Consulting Success podcast, where I'm talking to different successful consulting business owners. And so it really is impacting a wide range of different organizations, whether it's the solo consultant or even consulting firms that have 10, 20, 150 plus consultants. This is coming up, and it's definitely impacting a lot of people. So before we get into what the impacts are and some maybe considerations for people, as well as some principles that they might want to apply, one thing that I will say, just as kind of a distinction or an important point, is that what I'll share is not necessarily being seen by everyone. There are certain industries, for example, if you're working in the AI space right now, or in some areas around machine learning or technology, you might not be seeing some of these things. I talked with a consultant that specializes in the fundraising kind of sector, and she's having her best year ever. So this is not a blanket across every industry or every type of consultant, but certainly the patterns have emerged, and I think they are apparent enough that it's really important that people at least know what's happening and can consider it and plan for it, so that regardless of where they are, they can kind of come through the other side thriving rather than potentially struggling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So yeah, what are the patterns?
You hit the nail on the head in terms of the starting point, Jonathan, which is budgets. Organizations, so buyers are definitely holding their budgets with a much firmer grasp than they were before. And so it doesn't mean that budgets aren't there. It doesn't mean that business isn't happening. It doesn't mean that organizations aren't making investments and bringing in external consultants or advisors. They still are. That's all happening. It's just that the sales cycles have slowed down. It's taking buyers longer to make decisions. They're more thoughtful with their decisions. And depending on the size of the organization, decisions now require more input and more people, where previously a department head may have had a certain budget and they could just make that decision by themselves if they thought that it was necessary. Now many organizations are requiring that they check with somebody above them, or they take it to a board meeting, or so just overall the sales cycle has slowed down. It's being extended, and it's taking longer for buyers to make decisions. So that's one really big one. The other one is that if it's not necessary, it's not being bought right now. And what I mean by that is, if we rewind the tape a little bit and look back a couple of years ago, and even a year and a half or so ago, organizations in general were, if they saw that they could make an improvement, if they saw they could add a new feature, if something looked like it would help them, they would throw money at it, right? Money was cheaper, and the kind of the thought process, the beliefs, just how people were looking at making decisions, they were moving much faster, and so that has shifted pretty dramatically. Where if an organization doesn't deem something to be necessary, if they don't see that it's going to add pretty significant value right now, they're just going to hold off. It doesn't mean that they won't do it, but they're probably not going to do it now. It's not going to be a top priority. So that's really important for consultants and advisors to keep in mind. Is how do you essentially position what you're offering in front of buyers so that it is necessary? Previously, again, you may have focused on how can we just make something better? How can we add a new feature or a benefit? Buyers these days are really reluctant to jump on that, and what they're actually looking for now and thinking about is this necessary? And if it's not, again, they're probably going to hold off and kind of put that in the back seat for a little bit.
Yeah, I've definitely seen a few people in my community, my coaching community, who are in sectors where this is clearly happening. Like they noticed a definite slowdown. Things are harder. They take longer. There's, like you said, more deliberation around the purchase. But also, to your point, it's not happening everywhere. There are definitely am seeing different things happen with people having their best year and just getting just having a lot of success. But I imagine, I mean, that happened. I remember in 2008, that recession or whatever you want to call it, that didn't hit me until like 2011. It didn't hit my clients until like 3 or 4 years later, but it ended up rolling through. So even if you're having a great year right now, stay tuned, because it could be that, it could be that you'll be facing something like this in the future. So get your pens out and take notes.
No, I mean, you're making a really good point. I was speaking with a consultant just the other day, has a team of about 25 people. And she was sharing with me that one thing that they're doing right now is just planning. So they're not necessarily implementing any big drastic changes inside of their business right now, but they're planning for different scenarios. If we lose this major client, how do we handle that? What do we do with team members? Do we have to let somebody go? Do we need to readjust? They're really starting just to be more thoughtful. And so again, even if your business is booming right now, that's fantastic, but it's worthwhile to just consider some of these things that we're talking about and that are happening out there, around you in this kind of current climate and environment. Because as you mentioned, even if it's not impacting you right now, it might start to impact you. And this is a good thing to also be thinking about in terms of how you show up and have conversations with your current clients or past clients to see if there's ways that they might not be thinking about certain things right now, that through a conversation with you, they might start thinking about these things. And so now you actually become a really, an additional kind of source of value or a really good thinking partner with them.
Okay. So what is the advice? Be patient, stick, keep following up. I mean, what's working for people in a scenario like this?
Yeah, I mean, there's 4 principles that we're spending quite a bit of time talking with our clients about. And before I get into those, maybe just a couple other quick points that might be helpful for people as they're thinking about the environment and the current climate. And the first one there is that buyers are also avoiding bigger engagements as a starting point. And again, this is not across every single business or every industry, but we're seeing this a lot, where previously buyers would be happy if they saw the value in an engagement. They'd write a big check and get going. We're now seeing buyers looking at an engagement, looking at working with a firm or a consultant, and they're not as quick to pull the trigger on a big engagement. So one of the lessons there, or one of the opportunities for a consultant today, is to think about how can they really create a discovery offer? How can they find a starting point that is deemed as necessary and very relevant for that ideal client, and lead with that. And when you do that, right, it's kind of like the Trojan horse, right? You get your foot in the door. Once you're there, then you're able to find ways to create more value, to kind of expand that engagement and ultimately still generate a larger engagement. But if you're trying to lead with a much bigger project, and even if that worked for you before, you might start noticing that it's not going to be working as well for you right now. So that's one thing I'd say. The other one is just a kind of a higher level idea, but it's something that we're seeing coming up a lot. And so I think it's important for people to at least acknowledge this. And that is that many buyers right now, many companies right now are looking to do more with less. right? So in some situations, they've let go a whole bunch of full-time people. And that doesn't mean that they have fewer problems today. They might have the same number of problems, or in many cases, they actually have more problems because they're trying to solve the problems they had before with fewer people and fewer resources. So for you as a consultant, that's actually a big opportunity, because you can help them to solve those problems or to make improvements, and tell them to get kind of more done with less. But I just had a conversation yesterday with a client that works in the UX space, and this is an opportunity that they just realized kind of came up in our conversation, that their messaging had not yet shifted to this kind of thinking that is clearly happening in their market with the specific types of clients that they serve. So I would highly recommend that people look at your marketing, whether you run ads or not, or you send emails, or you're publishing content. Are you addressing what your ideal clients and what the marketplace is thinking about right now? If your messaging is the same as it's always been, and it's not recognizing some of these shifts in the current climate that we're in, that might be an opportunity for you to actually start to see better results, higher levels of response, and again, just make your overall messaging resonate better with those that you do want to ultimately serve.
Always a good idea to revisit that stuff, especially when you've got big sort of national news level changes. Anything that looks like it's going to be sticking around for 3 months, 6 months. I mean, people have been talking about recession fears for like since the middle of last year,
Sure.
at least.
Mm-hmm.
So your website is not like a museum. You can go in there and change it and update
100%.
it regularly. When I say website, everything, all the messaging around that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always good advice, no matter what the situation is, to be empathetic to what's on the mind of your ideal buyer. And if there's something that you can help them with that's on their mind, then that should be reflected in your materials. It's like, 101. So that's, definitely a great tip.
I think there's also, like there's a real fine balance between acknowledging what's happening around you, and kind of choosing to accept it. So in my case, I'm an optimist. I'm an entrepreneur, right? I look at the the language or the media or the news and the kind of signs of recession, and I go, okay, like sure, but it's not going to change the approach that we're taking, or it's not going to change the energy that we bring to working with our clients. Or when we look at how we're making investments today, when I see what's going on around us, to me that's a sign of like why we need to invest even more, to get more help or to accomplish more. I'm not looking at this news going, this is time to put our head in the sand and just hope that things go well. At the same time, just because that's my mindset doesn't mean that I should not acknowledge what our ideal clients and the market that we want to serve, what they're thinking. And so that's back to the point we just talked about around messaging, is that you want to strike that balance of not let all this news and what you might be experiencing as a slowdown in the marketplace hold you back from taking big action. If anything, this is a better time to take big action, because many people won't do that. They're going to hold off. They're going to pull back. And when they do that, they're not going to make much progress. But if you're pushing forward, you're taking action, you're not only will you survive this most likely, but you're going to thrive and come out on the other side significantly ahead of all those that are kind of putting their head in the sand. But
it's a good opportunity to leapfrog people if you've got the cash flow to do it. And, I like your point about bringing an abundance mindset to the clients who are maybe thinking of things in a different way. They've got different demands. They've made different promises to their constituents, whoever they may be, and they're responding to different things. But if you bring that same, you can update your messaging to speak to them because it's about them, not you, but then still bring that positive abundance mindset to the engagement itself. So love it.
Completely.
All right. So yeah, before we move forward, I wanted to jump back a little bit and linger on this sort of the idea of starting with you called it a Trojan horse engagement. Like, this is a hot topic always. People are interested in like for folks who are used to doing big projects and just having phases of the project as one big thing. What is a piece, or maybe some examples of pieces that you see your audience break off as an initial piece? A lot of times in the software space, you might call it a roadmap, might call it a system architecture, might call it a blueprint, and they're usually like a fixed price thing. Some people will do them variable price based on value or based on the potential follow-on engagement, but largely speaking, they're generally fixed priced, and and they'll, it'll be like maybe 10 to anywhere from like 10 to 20 hours of work spread out across anywhere from like 3 to 6 weeks. And it's just like, it's $5,000 or it's 25 grand or it's 65 grand or whatever it is. And it's sort of a, not take it or leave it, but when clients come along or prospects come along, they're like, oh, that's how much this is. Right. I can see the benefits of it right here on this label, this package, this sales page, and I can make a buying decision about that and perhaps bring it to my handlers for approval or not. But is that just my little software development corner of the world? Like, what are other people doing for these kind of starter engagements?
Yeah, so a lot of the elements that you just outlined there, Jonathan, are certainly applicable to other industries. I'll touch on this maybe a little bit as well when we kind of go over some of the 4 principles, because this is aligned with number 3 that we'll look at. But discovery offers that we see, so we refer to them typically as discovery offers. The way that you name them, I mean, you mentioned blueprint or system architecture or a roadmap. The naming isn't as important. However, there are certain naming conventions that in some industries will actually hurt you more than help you. For example, some people refer to them as an assessment. Well, in some industries, an assessment simply says to the buyer, hey, we're going to pay you to try and learn about our business. And a lot of buyers don't want to pay you to learn about their business. Right. They want you to already know about their business or know about the industry. In others, the word audit. Right? So fill in the blank audit. To some, that connotation, it's, well, like, I don't really want somebody to audit me. Like, that's just, it doesn't feel right. So that is something that you want to consider depending on what industry you're in. Most of the discovery offers that we see, so across the board, they tend to range somewhere between 1,500 to 15,000. That's not a hard number. It's not a rule. Sometimes people, might creep up above that and be at 20 or 25,000. But typically the goal of the discovery offer is just to get your foot in the door. And so if you're getting up to, like, for example, we had one client who's in the real estate field that wanted to get some feedback on a discovery offer. They're positioning it as an $87,000 deal. We looked at it and said, it's not that it can't work, but that's going to take somebody a little bit more time to think about than if you can break a piece off of this and offer something for example, 8,700 or 15,000, or right. And so this is, again, the whole thing about these offers is that it's meant to be a no-brainer, easy decision. There's very little risk involved. And the thinking behind it is that if a buyer is not going to say, if they can't say yes to, for example, 15,000, why would they say yes to 150,000, right? And so the positioning of these offers is simply it's not for it to be a standalone offer that you go in and deliver and you're done. The buyer needs to see that this is just the starting point. And it's the first thing that needs to happen typically to get them moving in the right direction to achieve their ultimate goal. So if their goal, let's just say simply is to ship a new product, well, the discovery offer is not going to allow them to ship the new product, but it's the first thing that needs to be done in order to ship that product effectively, without waste, more profitably, on time, so forth. So that's really what we tend to look at is, what is the first thing that you would typically do anyways with a client on a project that is necessary in order for them to have a positive result, and is also going to really help them to ensure that they're getting that project started on the right foot. So how can you help them to eliminate waste? How can you help them to make things more profitable? How can you really demonstrate and show some progress? So it's not going to deliver the ultimate result, but it's going to give them some result or a quick win, or help them to see that, they're not much clearer about the path forward. And now they're going to feel much more comfortable, much more confident to say, okay, I see that we've made some progress here, or we've even got a quick win or some value. You're not just somebody who says something, you actually, do what you say. Now we feel much more confident in making a significantly bigger investment. So that's really the first way that we tend to look at it, is what is the starting point for any given project or kind of program or offer that you have. The other, however, is in some cases, it might just be, for example, finding a very timely topic to deliver a workshop on, or some kind of experience that, again, gets your foot in the door, allows you to demonstrate value to, create some sort of a result or show some progress. And it's really now it's starting to form that relationship and a higher level of trust, so the buyer feels more comfortable to do more work with you. So that's really what people want to think about is, what's going to be most relevant for your ideal client. If you're offering a starting point in terms of discovery offer, but that's not really what your ideal client wants. If they're interested in shipping products, and the first thing that you're talking about is, well, no, what we need to do is, a deep analysis of X, but that's not what they want. That's not what they think is valuable. It's just gonna be more challenging to sell that to them. So you want to find, how can we position what we're offering as what the marketplace really wants, where they see value in. Hopefully there's some alignment over those two, and that's where you begin. That's where we tend to see people have some really great success.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for going a little bit deeper on that. And for folks who are kind of excited about this idea and want to hear more, search for the Alex Hillman episode on this very here podcast. Cool. So let's move on, because that was perfect. I think you said you have 4 principles. Is that what you called them?
Yeah. Call them principles, ideas, themes. It's really the kind of advice or talking points that we've been sharing or discussing with clients quite a bit, around the topic of how to sell into organizations, how to, move deals forward, given the current climate that, many people are experiencing, that we've already talked about. So we can go over those 4 if you want.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So the first is focus. And this really looks like, if you've, let's say you have 5 or 6 different services or offerings, now's a great time to really look at those more closely. And instead of trying to offer a whole bunch of different things and spread your kind of marketing, your messaging kind of wide and thin, this is a time to be much more focused, to find what's been working and what is going to be most relevant for the marketplace, and lean into that. To really stand out, to really be known for something. This is a good time to be doing that. So think focus over going kind of wide. Mm-hmm. The second, and feel free if you want to jump in on any of these, Jonathan. Or
so focus. So that particular kind of focus is around your sort of product and service offerings. Mm-hmm. So
and ideal client, I would say too. Is the other part
that's
of
my
this.
question. Yeah.
Yep.
So like, what's been working? What of your offerings, what is the most relevant now to your ideal buyer, and position that, like, go really hard on that positioning, double down.
Correct. Yeah. So this is, again, it's like looking at every aspect of your business and really figuring out what's been working for us and what hasn't. And let's not try now to expand and try and improve on things that haven't necessarily been working for us. This is a time to identify what's been working and just make that better and do more of that. Because for many organizations, again, this is not going to be everybody, but for many, they're not going to have the luxury to just throw stuff at the wall and kind of see what sticks. This is a time where you do want to be thinking about cash flow. You want to be thinking about, making sure that the business is really strong to survive anything that might slow down, what you've been experiencing to this point. So to get through that and get through it unscathed, and to get through it, more profitably and more successfully, focus is an important keyword as it comes to, relates to your services, who your ideal clients are, and so forth. And then that kind of brings us to the second point, which is kind of directly connected, and it's profitability. So this is not the time to do unprofitable work or to take big chances. As an entrepreneur, right, we often take risks, but you really want to look at the risk and reward of what you're doing these days, because if you take a big risk and you're not set up to weather that storm, if it doesn't pan out the way that you'd hoped, you might be putting not only your paycheck on the line, but your employees or your team members, if you have a team. The other part of that is looking a little bit deeper. And when I talk about profitability, this is a great opportunity to run a bit of an analysis on profitability with kind of 2 segments. One is profitability of projects. So as we talked about, with number 1 being focus, not all projects are created equal. And this is a good time to look at, and identify which projects, what type of work is the most profitable, and consider doing a lot more of that work, updating your messaging to focus more on that work, making more offers around that kind of work, and just even focusing your content on that kind of work, as opposed to just taking on projects even if they're higher revenue, but if they're not as profitable, that's an important consideration. And then likewise, not all clients are created equal. We took a client through an exercise on this, and they were treating all their clients the same way. They were taking on kind of all projects as long as it kind of fell into the bucket of what they were good at doing. But when they went through this analysis of client profitability, it became very clear that a certain type of client was actually making up the vast majority of their profitability. And so once that kind of light bulb went on for them, that allowed them to go, well, yeah, we shouldn't even take projects that, from these types of smaller clients. And we need to have a minimum dollar project for us to, to think about engaging with somebody, because below this, it just really eats up our time and erodes our profitability.
Yeah. It can be attractive for folks who have employees to just take on work that's not super profitable so that you're comfortable making payroll and
Sure.
Okay, but that's really kicking the can down the road. So for folks who want to hear more about specializing in a particular kind of client in particular, check out the Corey Quinn episode and the Geraldine Carter episode, where they both talk about specializing on verticals and how they do that with their clients. But yeah. I could not agree more.
I love how you're bringing in those past episodes for
you're ticking all these boxes, right? It's like
that's great. So that's number two is focusing on profitability. Number three is being flexible, and so this might kind of come across as, well, like, which one is it? But the reality is that if you are starting to see your business slow, if your pipeline isn't as full as it was before, if deals are dragging on, you want to be flexible. And this can mean many different things. But for example, just to kind of share a few ideas, it might mean that if you had previously you would, let's say, take on projects that were $100,000, and that was like a typical engagement. Well, now you might need to look at, well, how do we actually maybe restructure this and start with a $25,000 engagement? So think like discovery offer, right. Or if there's 4 different phases of a project, maybe you just start with the first or the second, or you kind of repackage that offering, and instead of trying to sell all 4 at once, you just sell the first 2. So I'm not suggesting that people discount. That's not what this is about. This is not about making less money and just doing more work. This is about maybe repackaging or shifting scope, working with the buyer and figuring out, based on what they are able to do right now, what they're willing to do right now, and what their budget is, collaboratively figuring out how you can, again, by being flexible, you can make something work for both of you. And in the past, people may have had the luxury where they didn't have to do that, where they could just stand firm, knowing there's lots of business. People were making decisions relatively faster. A lot of money was being invested. If that's not the case in your industry right now, or if you're starting to see the signs of that, being flexible can really be a good practice and benefit for your company.
Yeah, one way I've done this personally in the past is to offer be flexible with my payment terms, where normally I'd ask for 100% upfront, and then they would say like, oh, we can't do that for whatever reason. Maybe it's cash flow, maybe it's trust, whatever it is. So payment terms is something that you can be flexible on, work with the buyer to make it fit into the boxes that they need to fit it into, instead of just, like you said, just being like, there'll be a new lead tomorrow. I don't need to stick to my guns here on payment terms or something like that. But I also like your point about repackaging stuff, which is, it could seem like that is a lack of focus, but but it's not. If you take something that it has been working and is relevant to your ideal types of clients, you prune down to, like, say, a particularly profitable vertical or something like that, and you've got this offer that's been working, you've been delivering it in a particular way, you can rethink how you deliver it, break it into chunks, like you're saying, or who knows what, like you could maybe market it differently. I love you did say repackaging is exactly what I was thinking. It's like taking the same pills and putting them in a new bottle, and your activities during the delivery phase might end up being the exact same thing. They probably will end up being the exact same thing. You're not creating an innovative new service engagement. You can stay focused on something that has been working and just change the way you talk about it, change the way you present it to the buyer, perhaps change the way the payment terms work, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't have to be a negative thing, right? It's actually it can be exciting. It's an opportunity for you as a business owner to be creative and think about how you can adjust some things, try some new things in terms of how you're positioning them to get something to click and to work.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do, honestly, about my own business. It's really
Right.
fun.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so that's number three, and then number four, we kind of hit on this keyword once a moment ago here, but it's the pipeline. So this is the time to build it. This is the time to lean in and not lean away. Focusing on relationships and providing value. If your business has been coasting, maybe it's just been going well. You want to spend more time now on building your pipeline. And I'm not talking about trying some new wild things on social media to get people's attention, or hiring a social media person just to put out more content and just to get in front of more people. That's probably not going to work given this kind of environment, because again, people are more thoughtful in their how they're going about buying and purchasing. But if you can leverage your network, if you can get more referrals and introductions, if you can create opportunities for the people that are in your network to learn from you through a training, a webinar, some other format, if you can find ways to deliver more value and strengthen the relationship with the people that you already have around you. So think past clients, current clients, prospective clients, really focusing on the pipeline, focusing on doing follow-up. That's really important right now because you probably will need to get in front of more of the right people. So I'm not saying necessarily a ton of new people, although that certainly can be valuable, but your frequency and your touch points, this is a good opportunity and a great time to check in with people, to see how they're doing, to see how you might be able to support them, to offer them, whether it's even a free training or something for them or for their teams, or maybe some kind of a paid engagement that is relevant and timely based on what's happening in the world right now, what people in that specific industry are thinking about. So really, again, focusing on the pipeline, being intentional with it, being committed, making sure that you have a good plan for activating your pipeline and following up and staying on top of it is really, it's a best practice to do all the time. But previously, people may have been in a situation where they were just kind of coasting along. They were full of work, and it was more an issue around capacity. Well, going forward, that may not necessarily be the case. And so rather than waiting until you wake up one day and going, oh, like my biggest client just slashed our budget in half, and now I don't know what to do. It's better if you can start putting your foot on the gas pedal and pushing that accelerator around your pipeline, so that you can start to kind of accumulate the benefits of compounding that comes from regular touch points and having a good kind of marketing and relationship building system in place.
Yeah, I mean, this is, no matter what the situation is, this is good advice. Like, this should be a piece of your process.
Mm-hmm.
One last callback. Look for the Ruben Swartz episode where we talk about CRMs and that sort of thing to help with tools for this kind of thing. But leading with value, this is the key piece here, where you could say to, for example, to a group of past clients who might be wrestling with something that you're aware of them wrestling with something. Be like, put together like a free private webinar just for your best clients and say like, hey, here's this thing. Everybody's thinking about AI right now. I know you're wondering about it too. I've done some research into this. I've done some, and I think there's some pros and cons but there might be something valuable to you. You can join me here or watch the replay after, but just do something like that. Even one thing I used to do a lot when I was consulting, and I had a lot of people. It was sort of when I was consulting in the mobile strategy space, things were changing so fast from like 2010 to 2015 that I could barely keep up with it. And that my full-time job was keeping up with what was going on, so that when my customers had questions, my clients had questions, or they had a situation, I wanted to be super proactive about, like, just filtering down to the things that were relevant to them and not the massive amount of noise. And so I would just share, I'd be listening to my podcast feed. I'd be reading my, this is back in the RSS days with Feedly and stuff. And I'd just be like, oh, I'm like, I should forward this to, the guys at client B, or I should send this to the CEO of client
Totally.
D, or
Hmm.
this isn't even a client, but we met at a conference, and I would just like attune myself as I was doing my own research that I had to do anyway. And I just had this background process where part of my brain was always wondering who I could forward this to, whether they were past client or not, potential client or not. And I was really in the habit of sort of bookmarking all these things. Then I would go through and say, oh, I just got to send this to, whatever, send this to Corey or whatever. And it's amazing because, and it's super critical to be doing this when you aren't desperate for work.
Hmm.
It's the
Exactly.
worst time to do this. It's so transparent and awful to do this when you're like desperate for work. You're like,
Well,
oh,
because buyers can see it, right? They can sense it because your messaging, yeah, it just hits on it from the front, like from the start of when you reach out. People almost feel like it's that bait and switch kind of thing, right? You put something in front of them, like, "Hey, how are you doing? Oh, by the way," and then you're like, "Oh, wait a sec." That doesn't feel like what I was.
yeah, you rush it. It's too rushed. They can tell. So this should be like flossing. You should do this every day. So have someone, if you have a team, have someone be doing this, but probably it should be you,
Hmm.
and be doing it. I want to say daily, but at least once a week. Anyway, I've talked about this quite a bit with Rochelle on TVOA as well, where processes for keeping warm, just keeping relationships warm.
Yeah, it's a very simple thing that has provides incredible results, but most people don't do it because they're just busy running their
Hmm.
businesses and living life. But as we just kind of talked about, if you leave this, if you neglect this, when you actually really start needing the business and you want to grow your pipeline,
Mm.
but you need it to happen soon. That's like it's not that it's too late, but the sooner that you start this, the sooner you'll start seeing results.
Yeah, don't let the garden die.
Hmm.
Cool. So, well, I know we're coming up against time. So, could you tell folks where they can connect with you online? And maybe you mentioned before the call, you mentioned a new ebook about fees or pricing that sounded really interesting.
Yeah, we're definitely getting a lot of questions from people, given what's happening and kind of the environment that we're in around how they should be thinking about their pricing strategies and their fees for consulting and so forth. So we put together a guide that really looks at how consultants should be charging and can think about charging and being strategic with their pricing for 20, in 2023. So you can get that guide if you'd like. It's completely free at consultingsuccess.com/fees guide. So that's FEESGUIDE. So consultingsuccess.com/fees guide. And you get instant access to that guide if that would be helpful for you.
Cool. I'll add that to the show notes, dear listeners, so you don't have to type it out. You can just tap right on there. Well, this has been great. Thanks so much for joining me, Michael.
Hey, Jonathan, always enjoy our conversation. So thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time for Ditching Hourly. Bye.